No Justice, No Peace, Part 4. When I started this series, I didn't expect it to go this far, but, there's just so many places and ways we can go with this, from causation to effect to solution to just general angst and what's going on. But with that said, this Part 4 is co-titled or subtitled Truth Be Told, because frankly, the truth shall set you free. I mean, we've heard that everywhere from Jesus to Aunt Esther. I mean, and it is so true. And we see it really clearly right at the start of mankind in Genesis chapter 2, where God tells Adam that he can eat of any tree Adam can eat, except for the tree of good and bad, and the tree of knowledge, the tree of life and the good of knowledge of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He could eat of any tree except for those two. But we hear that, and then just in the next verses, you turn the chapter, but in the next verses, here comes the devil. The devil comes and gets in Eve's ear, and he says to her, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Now, I already said that's actually quite the opposite of what God said. They could eat of any tree except for the two, and then here comes the devil. Did he really say you couldn't eat from any tree in the garden? And he continues, you will not die. For God knows, though, that when you eat from this tree, that your eyes will open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And in that second part, there's some truth in the statement, but the intent is deceit based on the first statement. Who did these statements serve? They serve the devil's purposes. The devil is slick. Remember that. The devil is slick. His masterful temptation with Eve was so effective that in one conversation, it appears, he led her from proximity to God living in paradise to the fall. He helped her to cast doubts on what God actually commanded. What he actually said was really simple, and he cast doubt on what God actually commanded. God told Adam that he could eat from any tree in the garden except, but the devil drew the woman into thinking about the fairness of God's command. Then he flatly called God a liar, saying that's not going to be what happened, then questions God's character and motives. And we wonder why God immediately kicked them out of the garden once they decided to follow the devil. God's simple command was changed, misunderstood, caused confusion, and ultimately sin, which led to the fall. So the lie led to the fall. With this one lie, Satan, the liar, sparked the fall. And when Adam and Eve rejected God's truth and accepted the devil's lie, that was the moment that all of the troubles of the whole world began. So why do we follow this example? Why do we follow this example? The New Testament gives us another one. It shows us the story of Ananias and Sapphira. Ananias and Sapphira were married, right? They were a married couple who sold their land and gave the proceeds to the disciples. Only they didn't give all their money to the disciples that they were charged. And when Peter asked them, was this all of the money? After they decided, and actually they did already hold some of it back, they lied. They told him that this was all the money. They shortchanged Peter. And when they did that, guess what happened to each of them? They actually died. They were taken away, gone. No justice, no peace. The truth shall set you free. Yet, we see what happened here in Genesis and then in Acts on the dawn of the church. We keep following and dying because of shiny objects. For Adam and Eve, it was the fruit, and that was the pleasure to Eve's eye. For Ananias and Sapphira, it was money. Adam and Eve disobeyed God because of a lie that was told to them. And by the time we got to Ananias and Sapphira, man had kind of degenerated to the point that we didn't need the devil to lie for them. They lied for themselves. Thankfully, though, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples, that you will know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So why this talk about lying this morning? Because with lying comes consequences, and the consequence of lying is death. For us today, we obviously do not pass away from earth. We don't transition to our eternal existence, but we continue in the path of Eve in defiance of God. And when we defy God, what happens? We go from proximal to distal. Lying is anti-God. It's so anti-God that two of the 10 commandments, right, are dedicated to honesty. Thou shalt not lie, you shall not bear false witness. God means by when he says dying to Eve and Adam in the Garden of Eden, that you will go from having life with me, you'll live in the light, you will have abundance, you will have all that is good, to darkness. Living in the darkness or being separate from God is dying. That is, in essence, what is hell. We claim to be one nation. The United States claims to be one nation under God, right? But we're built and continue to foster a great lie, which is in a large part responsible for the revolution that is now occurring. Lies repeat themselves because you continue to try and cover them up. But the truth does not mind revelation. The truth encourages transparency. The truth encourages visibility. The truth advocates inclusion. The truth matters, both to us as individuals and it should to us as a society. As a society, we value truth. We value truth so much that we have this myth of a young George Washington, our first president, who supposedly cut down a cherry tree and proclaimed, "I cannot tell a lie." The story is a testament to how much Americans supposedly value and treasure not just this first president, but treasure truth. Unfortunately, in the annals of history, it is like we have one honest hero, but we have 10 dishonest scoundrels, which leads us to having no justice and therefore no peace. But supposedly, and this is what I hear, the truth shall set you free. But the reasons that people pursue deceit are simple. For many, deceit holds the key to fame, money, revenge, power. And these prove all too tempting. We saw it again with Eve and Adam. We saw it again with Ananias and Sapphira. And this has often resulted in hoaxes, perjuries, forgeries. And these lies have extreme ripple effects. The Great American Lie is one of them. So what do I mean about this Great American Lie? We're in the middle of a revolution, right? A revolution required because of the historic and contemporary treatment of Black people and other people of color. The lie is this, that Black people are inferior. And that lie initially led to chattel slavery and its ridiculous justification. This lie led to the Civil War. And the emancipation freed 4 million slaves. 4 million Black folks were enslaved. And the emancipation dismantled the codified racial hierarchy that much of white society believed was ordained. And even a few Black folks bought into it. And when it was abolished, they had to adapt their ideas to a new legal regime and created new means of reinforcing this racial hierarchy where whites sat on top. It's been so crazy because you've had American scientists like Samuel George Martin. He was born in the late 1700s and he did most of his work in the early 1800s, if you want to call it work. He was the originator of scientific racism, okay? Scientific racism, which relied on sketchy anecdotal evidence or recollections, I should say, and unreliable observations, as well as physical measurements to demean and cast the black man as inferior. And when I say anecdotal, sketchy observations, he basically sat around and observed, and then he recorded things as scientific based on how he saw them. And if you're looking through dirty glasses, if you're looking through a lens that's tainted or broken, you're going to have a broken image. So his conclusions were drawn based upon what he saw, which was already tainted. Groups like the Pioneer Fund, since the 1930s, have been responsible for feeding jerry-rigged data to society. Jerry-rigged data like that of Samuel George Martin. The fund's overarching goal is to finance research that proves that blacks are genetically inferior. Right, that's their objective. And this helps. The goal of this is to help to cite evidence that the lower economic and social status of Black Americans is in fact natural. That's the way things are supposed to be. And so, by extension, policies, interventions such as public assistance and affirmative action, whichever side you may fall on those issues, though, for example, could be written off as useless, impotent, and unnecessary. The fund's efforts have been in part successful because, despite the historically bad treatment that Black people have received in this country, it has allowed society, it has allowed the system, it has allowed the man to, in large part, disregard its responsibility, ignoring the white population's hand in forming the conditions, and take no ownership of the disparate treatment that results in health, wealth, safety, crime, and education issues that face Black folks and other people of color. Despite the fund's position, it has been confirmed, time and time again, it has been confirmed that race has virtually no genetic significance. This lie has prevailed because since the first Africans arrived in colonial-controlled America during the 1400s, not in 1619 as we're told, but in 1400s during colonial-controlled America, not before that, because another story, Black people have been coming to America since before then. It has been easier to blame the recipients of systematic and personal abuse for those bruises, breaks, and wounds it has absorbed than take ownership of the doling out of the beatings physically, mentally, and emotionally that have been given. It's easier and more comfortable to embrace the lie. Quick cliff note on race. The common classifications of race are based primarily on skin tone and other physical qualities such as bone structure, eye shape, and hair texture. Though these physical differences may seem to be extraordinary, they are controlled by a fraction of the genome. As the human species, we are estimated to be 99.9% the same. Our DNA is 99.9% the same. The differences generally separate families. That's how tight, that's how close we are in makeup. The few differences that do exist reflect the differences in environment or external factors, not core biology. Of note, the evolution of skin color occurred independently and does not influence any other traits such as mental abilities or behaviors. Possibly most important, science has yet to find any evidence. Science has not found any evidence, zero evidence, that indicates intelligence or a difference in intelligence between the races. Now, yes, there certainly are some biological differences between people, but they are few and superficial. The most important story of the genes tells us that we are family. Yeah, it's kind of corny to say it, but, we are all one family, and despite race or tribe. The lie is that Black people are inferior, therefore we merit inferior treatment, right? Yeah, though that may not be accepted as true by all. The residue of this sentiment is comforted sentiments of segregation, right? Separate but not equal, white flight, and continued efforts to reinforce the lie. Now, it didn't just stop there. It doesn't just stop with the fund, the Pioneer Fund, or segregationists, what have you. But just going back to something else. So the Pioneer Fund, nearly all of the scientists who submit for them or work with them, none of them are biological scientists, but yet they're giving information about genetics. They use language of genetics to help them maintain that there are biological differences, and there's an argument for white supremacy. So basically, they repackage old white nationalist racist ideas and give them respectability by putting them in intelligent language. It's kind of like a criminal using big words to sound uncriminal. Uncriminal, huh? Prime example, Arthur Jensen. A prime example of the effect of all of this. Arthur Jensen was an education and psychology professor at the University of Cal Berkeley, right? Now, he published an article that concluded that Black children were not genetically equipped to learn the same abstract concepts as white children. Now, even the agents at the uber liberal University of Cal Berkeley issued support for Jensen, who they cited Angela Davis's criticism of this article as one of the reasons that they fired her from a professorial post at UCLA. This is an example of how this nonsense has bled into popular culture. It doesn't just lie on the fringes. The publication of The Bell Curve in 1994 took the ideas about genetics and race, intelligence, behavior, and crime held by the Pioneer Fund recipients to the mainstream. The nearly 1,000-page book introduced to the broader public the ideas circulating in racist academic circles. And because they presented their work in, they couched it in these scientific terms, the book lent white supremacists a hand in their mission to change the way Americans discuss race, basic issues of race, and gave a pillow to white persons looking for an excuse to ignore this country's mistreatment of its darker pigmented people, and ignoring the state which it had held a hand in, rendering many. All of this in support of the lie. No justice, no peace, but the truth shall set you free. Now, the idea is that the Pioneer Fund lent credence to have been absorbed by racist organizations as well. Okay, so let's not just say that, okay, it's out there and people have this soft understanding, but and I'm gonna take time to talk about the importance of this, that it's lent its credence to organizations like the CCC, Council of Conservative Citizens, which was really popular in the 50s and 60s. It ebbed, but it had a resurgence. It was brought back in the 80s, right? And now, present day, I don't mean in the past, present day, their information is freely accessible on the web, and it's taken advantage of. It's absorbed. It's read. It's searched. And the CCC is not made up of some fringe folks. It's made up of business elites, bankers, and well-to-do doctors, lawyers, what have you. Historian Charles Payne described them as pursuing the agenda of the Klan with the demeanor of the Rotary Club. Though membership has diminished since the 90s, there have been some big names that have been revealed to be part of this organization. Former Congressman Bob Barr of Georgia. Then Senator, and now he wasn't just any senator, he was the Senate Majority Leader, Trent Lott, a Republican from Mississippi. He gave 5 addresses to this organization. In 2004, an intelligence report found, and it revealed that between 2000 and 2004, 38 elected U.S. federally elected officials while they were in office, had attended CCC events. Now, I'm not assuming they were there to do any exposés or anything of that nature. The Guardian reported in 2015 that the white supremacist organizations like the CCC still make large contributions to top Republican office holders like Senator Ted Cruz, find that one a little interesting, who promised to return the donation, though, after a news outlet approached them with questions. Would he have returned it if they hadn't approached him? I'm not saying that Cruz and all of the other Republican candidates that the CCC donates to are members of white supremacist groups, but people don't generally donate to candidates who advance causes that they don't endorse or oppose causes they reject. The CCC claims its website now exists to educate white Americans about the dangers of black criminality. Check this out. If you think you can educate them or embarrass them or reason with them, or that Christian compassion will be reciprocated, then you are the kind of person who will be completely baffled when they kill you, rape your entire family, burn your house to the ground. Those are the words of Earl Holt, the president of the CCC. The lie continues. 5 years ago, on a Wednesday night in June 2015, a 21-year-old white male walked into a black church in Charleston, South Carolina. He sat through Bible study with his members. He prayed with them for over an hour. He then gunned down in cold blood 9 black parishioners. How much more sordid does it get? Dylan Storm Roof sat quietly with the group for over an hour before taking out his Glock pistol and firing 70 rounds. He paused and reloaded 5 times. And during this slaughter, he yelled out, "Y'all are raping white women. Y'all are taking over the world." His false sense of reality, his delusion is based on the lie. This idea that black men are inherently violent and are prone to rape white women. The fact that it is false has not stopped generation after generation in this country from spewing and accepting this missive. This idea has served as one of the primary justifications for the need to oppress black people to good white people. All of this because of the lie. No justice, no peace, but the truth shall set you free. Then presidential candidate, Donald Trump steps in. He tweeted in November 2015 an image from a neo-Nazi group filled with bogus crime statistics. Clearly bogus. The graphic Trump tweeted supposedly showed that black people are uniquely violent. The Washington Post found that Trump's tweet was grossly false. It wasn't like, there was 1 or 2 degree separation. This is what he quoted. This is the data he quoted. He quoted the data that claimed that whites who kills whites are about 16%, okay? White man kills white man, they're about 16% of the time. That's what Trump's data showed. While the FBI's data and all accepted forms of data show that number is closer to 82 to 85%, right? 82 to 85% in reality, 16% per Trump. So guess who he blamed for the other killings of white people? He posts in he posts here that 81% of whites are killed by, guess who? Black people. Trump casts blacks as the primary killers of whites. Similarly, blacks tend to kill blacks. So in other words, blacks are the killers. Fact of the matter is, 80+% of whites are killed by whites. And similarly, 80+%, as close a higher, slightly high number, 85 or so more percent of blacks who kill blacks kill blacks. It has nothing to do with any disposition. It has everything to do with condition. Despite the overwhelming these overwhelming lies that he touted, and despite the fact that the FBI and other agencies have shown for decades before and were able to disprove subsequently, people weren't interested in the truth. And Trump was never able to substantiate the statements that he tweeted. But amidst these and other lies that he peddled, he got elected. And even worse, some people knew he was lying and excused his lies because of self-interest. What is ironic is that right now in this presidential cycle, you see this bumper sticker going around that re-elect Trump, no more BS. But what do you call someone who lies to you all the time? Is that regular? Misrepresented crime statistics are a main propaganda point in America's hate movement and a pillar of white supremacist thinking in the United States. And you know what, the movement is even so much to have people out in the street kneeling on people's necks or, talking about all lives matter. Those are the extreme. It's to take your eye off the ball and see the subtleties of racism. This is as apparent when President Trump tweets as it is when Amy threatens to call the police and to report that an African-American man was threatening her life when all of this happening is a 56-year-old Harvard graduate, former Marvel comic editor, asked her to put her dog on a leash in accordance with park rules. She was too conscious of the relationship between black men and the police. By all accounts, she's not a racist, but she was very familiar and very aware what her simple statement could do to this man and didn't bat an eyelash of yielding that power. Whether they realize it or not, the lie colors perception of people who, despite the torment that this country has doled out, have been leading contributors to science, culture, medicine, academia, labor, and more. Cooper and Trump have bought into the lie, which allows some to embrace the notion that the Confederate flag and its generals are something to be proud of. Since when did treason and losing become a prideful mark? If it is accepted that black people are more violent than others, that to some will in some way justify aggressive police treatment. If you accept the lie that black people are inherently dumber, you'll feel less inclined to help a person reach their full potential because it's likely not that high. The Tulsa riots, I guess by this point many of you have heard about, but for those who aren't familiar with, as you should be, it's a significant part of American history. The Tulsa riots, 100 years ago, where over 300 black people were killed because a white woman operating an elevator screamed when a black man, the shoeshine person in that same building, got on and bumped into her. What that turned into was him running off the elevator and then being chased and pursued. Within a day, over 300 black people were killed. An entire district in Tulsa was burnt out because 1,500 white men by foot, car, and yes, airplane robbed, looted, and destroyed an entire district because a man bumped into a woman on an airport. This lie that we're told played a direct role in the unnecessary murder of 300 black people. This was just a few years after an incident in Springfield, Illinois, where another mob of white men ran out 2,000 black citizens by burning down their houses and businesses, as well as businesses that allowed them in as patrons. Today, the Klan, neo-Nazi inspired groups still exist and influence individuals, local and national politicians. Politicians continue to ignore the plight of non-white people and chalk up police brutality, subpar schooling, healthcare, wage disparity, mass incarceration. Last one hired, first one fired. The income gap, I could keep going. But these politicians continue to ignore the lie. They either embrace it or ignore it. These lies don't just affect the perception of white perception of black people. They also affect other people's perception of black people. And as quiet as it's kept, it affects black people's perception of black people. Lies hurt. It's not benign when the president publicly told more than 2,700 false statements in 2019. That is 7.5 lies per day. He lied about every conceivable topic, from dealings with Ukraine to the size of crowds to literally the time of day. Why is this relevant? Truth is important because you can build something solid from it, something eternal from it. We claim we value truth because at the core, we know if someone will lie, they will cheat. And if they will cheat, you cannot build anything with confidence. Whether that's a social relationship, a professional relationship, familiar relationship, or otherwise, you cannot forge forward unencumbered if you're built on lies. But something seems to have happened to our American psyche because we have excused the necessity for basic truth, basic honesty in our conduct. Our president lies, Congress lies, the media lies. This is now not a blanket statement, but in the universe of these professions, there's enough guilty parties to muddy the clear waters of the river of truth. Spouses lie, kids lie. We shrug our shoulder and keep it moving as if it's acceptable. But each time that we are lied to, each time that we lie, we create separation, just like Eve and Adam did in the Garden of Eden. Don't make anything of me saying Eve and Adam, Adam and Eve. It doesn't matter. Is it enough? Is it enough? Is it enough that over 400 black people have been killed by police brutality in the last 5 years? Is it enough that black and brown children receive subpar education and healthcare at the beginning of their lives, and many do not have the resources to pursue college or postgraduate education and to advance their careers? Is it enough that there's been over a 500% increase in prison population over the last 40 years, where the growth is supplied by African Americans who are 5.9% more likely to be incarcerated than whites, and Hispanics are 3.1 times more likely? I am not